Hello everyone, welcome back to the lecture series Algorithmic Sustainable Design. This is going to be the 10th lecture in the series. We have two more. And today we are going to cover the following topics: generative codes and their application to building and urban morphology. Even though all of the last three lectures are going to be covering generative code, so this will be just an introduction. Then I will discuss how secularization destroys public space, and then mention some spiritual architects, and then I will end up with the legalizing codes, how codes become part of the legal system. Let me begin by definition. What are generative codes? These are rules that tell you how to build. The codes evolve the form of what you build as you're building it. Therefore, they specify the process of building and not the final form. And this is different from static or form-based codes that are used today. The form-based codes obviously specify the form, but they don't specify the process. To add to the confusion, form-based codes can be either good or bad, so there are different types of form-based codes. So let me discuss what we have today, which is before we implement our generative codes. We have form-based codes, and they do not specify a sequence of transformations. They just specify the final form directly. And this is made legal in most of the world today by zoning ordinance. But the zoning ordinance does not concern itself with the adaptive evolution of form, which is what we are concerned about for a more humane architecture. It is possible to get some adaptivity built into form-based codes, and that will make them good codes instead of bad codes. Nevertheless, in the vast majority of urbanist codes that are in use today, especially in the developed countries, this is not usually done. So form-based codes that are used do not have adaptivity built in. Let me now tackle this topic of bad versus good form-based codes that are used by developers. A bad form-based code will generate inhuman forms in urban regions. And most of today's urban codes are bad. A good form-based code, on the other hand, can generate a healthy environment. What is the criterion for judging what is good or bad? Well, the criterion is a mathematical one. A good code will foster a wide range of human activity on all scales, and each of those activities will have to coexist, and some of the activities will have to be protected from the others. And this is what the new urbanist codes, and here I refer to a wide variety of codes, this is what new urbanist codes try to do. Let me explain slightly. This is an important difference between good and bad. This is not ethics, this is more mathematics and biology. A good form-based code has in it the ability to structure the built environment so that it will accommodate pedestrians of all types, healthy people, children, older, infirm individuals, handicapped people on the pedestrian level. It can accommodate transportation like bicycling, walking, slow-moving vehicles. It can also accommodate fast-moving vehicles, trucks, delivery vans, emergency vehicles. All of these are very different and have very different structural needs. A good form-based code accommodates all of them, and most importantly, it protects the weaker parts of the system, namely the human beings, from the most stronger parts. When you have a close proximity of fast-moving trucks and pedestrians, you need to protect the pedestrians by built structure, by the way the geometry occurs. Good new urbanist codes do that. Bad codes don't do that. Bad codes normally ignore or eliminate the pedestrian altogether. They give priority to fast-moving vehicles. Speed is the catchword for this, so they result in an inhuman environment. Now, let me move on. How do we build something? How do we build something that has value to us, the built environment? People only care for what they love, and that goes for what they build. There's a deeper ownership than simply buying a place. Love cannot be bought, as humans know, at least most humans know. So just buying a piece of real estate does not make you love it. We only love something that we have created. We love our children. We love handicrafts that we have made, even though they may not be as beautiful as the museum pieces. Whatever we create, we love. Therefore, this leads us to the very simple but powerful conclusion. People must have a hand in creating and maintaining a place. That's the only way they can love the place. And now I'm talking about urbanism. The place can be loved if people have a hand in creating it. If it is created by somebody else and we feel unattached, alienated from this place, we certainly don't love it. It's either neutral or we hate it. Where does the sense of community come from? Community comes from, in urbanist terms, from public space. An urban community is a consequence of a successful public space where people can do either of two things. And those two things are done together. First of all, to meet other people in a public space, whether it is an open plaza or or even a private space that's something like a restaurant or an enclosed space that is frequented by many different people. And more importantly, various people can connect to this public space and indirectly connect to each other. That means that one person connects to the public space, another person connects to the public space. Therefore, indirectly, the first person connects to the second person because they are both connecting to the public space. This creates community. There is no community otherwise. The 20th century, especially in the industrialized nations, has no community because modernism destroyed the built environment's public spaces. Here we have the secret for the decline of our cities. Let me continue now with generative codes. We start design by intuitively sensing the possible configurations of what we can build on the land. This is the time-proven method used, for example, by Shinto architects in Japan. The sensitivity to what the place has and what the place can support. And once we use this sensitivity and proceed step by step to generate centers in the sense of Alexander, geometrical coherence as we design and as I have described in the previous lectures in the series. Our goal is to imbue the land with structure that enhances and creates life there so that we adapt to human existence, human feelings, human functions. We do not want to destroy existing life on the sites. And by existing life, I mean not only worthwhile, beautiful trees or landscape or rocks, but also a feeling that touches human beings from the complex morphology of the existing geometry. If there's something there that we feel and we cannot even express, we need to preserve that and not destroy it. Here now is a different paradigm for life, not biological life. This is a concept introduced by Christopher Alexander in his Nature of Order. There is a life there in configurations. There's a life in geometry. No architect or planner talks about the life of the site nowadays. Well, I should say, the architects and planners that talk about the life of the site are members of our group, very loosely defined, but this is not regularly taught in architecture schools and not practiced by most architects and planners. They assume that the site is lifeless. It is meant only to be cleared. This is a fundamental philosophical difference with us. The normal philosophy of approaching the land now is that the act of building imposes human will. The all-powerful humans go in and destroy what is there without giving it a second thought and impose a form, impose a building. We are proposing the exact opposite method. We are proposing building to enhance the life of the site. After this general introduction, where are we going to find methods? Well, there is a nice new book that's just coming out entitled New Urbanism and Beyond. It's a collection of essays, and there are 2 chapters in this book written by my friends. The first chapter is Generative Codes, which is exactly what I'm talking about today. It's a chapter written by Christopher Alexander, Brian Hansen, Maggie Moore, and Michael Mahaffey. And there is a second chapter entitled Growing Sustainable Suburbs. That's written by Lucien Steil, myself, and Michael Mahaffey. And here's the book, New Urbanism and Beyond. And of course, it contains many, many more chapters by noted urbanists. And I think it'll be very useful to those who want to go deeper. Let me review 6 steps from our chapters. Of course, in this book there are different methods proposed, so I'm going to review what is in our 2 chapters. A simplification of techniques that will serve as an introduction to our method. First, any new structure on a site must enhance existing adaptive life of the neighborhood. Here, I mean a more global approach. We have to see what is happening in the neighborhood. We have to see the morphology, the geometry, the activities of people, the social structure of the neighborhood. And we must try to enhance it as far as we can. We are against disconnected speculative building, such as occurs nowadays. What I mentioned earlier, somebody goes in, wipes something out, and builds something speculatively. We are not condemning all speculative building. I will discuss that later, how speculative builders, which is a method of making money, which is a perfectly reasonable business proposition, how speculative builders can be helped by our methods. I will give details later. The design has to be done right on the physical site, and the layout should be done by consensus with the users. These were details that I described in an earlier lecture. We need to use a pattern language, and to get the design as complete as possible before transferring it to paper. So we transfer the design to paper only after it is complete, and if we have a major revision to the design, we need to go back to the site to check if this revision works. We should not make a big revision in the office on paper, because that may or may not work. We need to check it with the site. Now, public spaces are the main pedestrian spaces as chosen by consensus with the users. I'm going to emphasize public spaces now because those are the most damaged in our contemporary built environment. We need to choose to save the most sacred areas by turning them into public spaces. And I will explain in greater detail what the sacred areas are. Very briefly, it is something that everyone feels connected to. On a particular site, there are portions of it that we feel more connected to than others. Those should be saved because they have some sacred quality. The life of the surrounding region will be rooted in its public spaces. So community and the healthiness of the fabric from a social point of view depends upon its being rooted in its public spaces. That's why I keep coming back to emphasize public spaces. I'm going to propose today a revolution in the process of development. I would like to replace the old paradigm where money takes absolute control of urban form. When power is concentrated, it corrupts the project's design and gives an inhuman result. So I propose that the developer or the government funding the project must share power. And I will introduce a democratic solution for this power sharing. I propose to copy the United States Constitution into a three-way separation of powers. Let me remind my non-American listeners what those the three-way separation of the U.S. government is into legislative, judicial, and executive branches of government, and they're all independent, and this separation guarantees democratic government. This was the stroke of genius of the founding fathers of the American state, and has kept us more or less as a stable government for many, many years. It is a safeguard against totalitarianism, which has befallen many other nations. Now, taking this as a general idea to separate powers, which powers? Well, here they are. I want to separate three branches of urbanism. The first branch are the rules. Urbanists will make up the proper rules for generating healthy urban fabric. And at the moment, we still need to write the rules, or rather, my friends and I are writing the rules that generate healthy urban fabric, because many rules exist that generate unhealthy urban fabric. So that's a big problem in itself, but one of the branches of urbanism are the rules. The second branch is a project manager. The project manager oversees the application of the rules, of the urban rules, and he or she will act within governmental regulations. The third branch of urbanism is the institution, the developers, the builders, and the architects who apply our rules to build new urban fabric and to repair existing urban fabric. So we have the three-way separation into rules, project manager, and institution. This represents a democratic shift of power in order to get humanistic urbanism, which I claim is impossible or very difficult to achieve otherwise. The developer, financier, or the government will not control the entire process, because then that becomes totalitarian, and for very pragmatic reasons. It does not give a good result, it gives a terrible result. The power will belong with the current or future residents and will be exercised through their chosen project manager. So this is extremely important. I know that the word project manager exists today, but the project manager usually works for the developer. That's not what I mean. The project manager now will work for the current or future residences. The project manager has to be legally independent of the profit motive. He cannot be influenced by the developer, he or she. The project manager will work for and is paid by the community, not the builder. And to keep things free from corruption, the project manager will receive a fixed fee. And the job of the project manager is to maintain the human quality of the project. The project manager will have some direct control of subcontractors who will be working not strictly through the overall contractor. Now, subcontractors work exclusively for the overall contractor. The project manager will be able to direct craftsmen to be more autonomous in their designs, to be more creative. Allowing more creativity and autonomy requires some degree of supervision, so the project manager will supervise the periodic adjustment of the design to allow for spontaneity and also to allow for quality control. My fellow urbanists in the United States look at this and immediately object to it and say, well, this cannot be implemented under existing rules. I'm well aware of that. So we propose to change the rules. We are proposing a new business plan. The developer will finance and profit from the project, and I would like to convince the developers that they can make even more profit using our three-way model. But the developer will not have control of the design process, which is the primary responsibility of the independent project manager. I hope now we are beginning to see how the separation of powers comes into action. We need a new type of agreement that will be signed between the owner and the architect. That's to protect autonomy in design from legal liability. We need a different type of contract. But even in the United States, a highly regulated country, That's very simple to do. We just get an American Institute of Architects addendum, officially approved, and whoever wants to use the addendum will add it to their contract. And this seemingly insurmountable problem is solved. The addendum to the contract will permit craftsmen to have expression and to be involved in the process of design while building. Incidentally, the new type of contract has been developed by Christopher Alexander, and those who want more details can go to his books. By opening up spontaneity and creativity, we need, of course, different measures of quality control. So that falls on the project manager. The project manager supervises craftsmen and holds periodic design reviews. The control of quality now is through the eyes on the side of the project manager and not by legal reference to paper design. What happens today is that a false type of quality control is legalistic, and everything is specified to the most minute detail, and the architect is not allowed even to go on the site, on the construction site. Quality is supposed to be maintained by threat of lawsuit. If something is 2 inches off, then there's a threat of lawsuit, and that's supposed to keep the quality. It does not keep the quality. It guarantees the minimum level of tolerance, and it results in a completely dead product. So I'm proposing to abandon all of that and to have the quality control via an entirely different, more adaptive and living process. The new type of contract will protect all parties from litigation over innovation. So the client who signs this contract will not come back and say, I don't like the way the tile floor looks. Well, you signed the contract, and which allowed spontaneity, and you had the opportunity to supervise the design while it was being built. But presumably the type of client who will find this more humane design appealing will also realize that it is bringing in more money and more value into the end result. I would like to go back and link this philosophy to the Grameen model for repair. You remember the Grameen Bank is the bank in Bangladesh that finances 200 million people by lending $1 to each. Dr. Muhammad Yunus, the director of the Grameen Bank, won the Nobel Peace Prize for the following reason. His bank and his ideas have pulled 200 million people out of poverty. We normally don't hear about that here in the developed world. But he has done that by focusing on the small scale. So I propose a finance system for individual repairs that's modeled on the Grameen Bank. Small loans to homeowners will enable them to undertake their own repairs. And this is not controlled by the developer. The new codes that we are going to implement forbid profit from change orders. They are now used to stop adaptation in buildings. I don't need to explain this to my US audience, but around the world, a change order is a clause in the contract that say even if you're building a custom house where theoretically you're supposed to have complete freedom in the design, if you change the sink and move it 2 feet over, you have to pay $2,000 as a penalty from the change order, which effectively forbids any spontaneity or creativity or input. So what we get is cookie cutter. We get the same box-like or phony house being built all over the suburbs and destroying the American suburbs. The small-scale funding idea will introduce a bottom-up component of development to balance the usual top-down process. At the moment, the development is strictly top-down and becomes oligarchic with a very, very bad and inhuman result. I already mentioned that my American colleagues object to all these, not because they don't like them. They say, you have great ideas, and Alexander and everyone else in your group, but you cannot implement them in the United States. Well, maybe we can, maybe we cannot. But what I propose is the standard model in most of the developing world today. There is a bottom-up building. And unfortunately, many governments don't realize that this is producing a very healthy urban fabric, and they try to copy the American model and try to impose top-down authoritarian urbanism, which is destroying the cities in the developing world. I only hope that they will eventually wake up before all the cities are destroyed. Only smaller funding distribution can develop living urban spaces. There is absolutely no other way to do it. We propose a community budget that is delegated to build and maintain the public space. That is used in gated communities. Well, everyone hates gated communities because they are the enclave for the rich. But we can learn one thing from gated communities. Every resident within the gated community pays a maintenance fee to the association, and that fee is used to maintain the grounds. Well, we can use that in the poorest of communities to maintain the outdoor walls, the gardens, the seats, the paths, trees, fountains, etc., to build them and to maintain them. And we have to make sure that this money is not otherwise shunted elsewhere. But it's a different problem. The method I'm proposing is drastically different from the procurement process driving suburban sprawl today. Now, let's look at some possible applications of this. First, we will look at the group of developments that is non-speculative. One approach is that landowners will finance their project. Either a single landowner has a lot and finances their own project, or a group of landowners want to build a section of city and they finance their own project. They will hire a project manager to facilitate the design, and the project manager has to be trained in the techniques we propose in order to guarantee the humanity of the project. The project manager will have to know what I'm talking about and to have read the books I refer to. The three-way separation of powers means that the local government will have oversight over the project and will check that our urban rules are correctly applied to generate living geometry. Now, in order to do that, we have to rewrite current zoning, at least in the United States. But if you want living urban fabric, you have to do that. Now, different from what I just discussed, there is speculative building. A developer or a government will build speculatively. They will create something without having the actual client or tenant in mind. The developer or the government builds something for future use by hypothetical people. That's fine. If we do it, we can do it far, far better than is done today. The inevitable business model for today can meet our three-way separation. And there are two different cases I wish to discuss because they require separate powers. First, the developer will work with a project manager appointed by the government. And that keeps separation of the powers. The project manager will be there to ensure that the project has a human aspect, even though you don't have the actual clients there yet. The second case is when the government builds. When the government builds speculative buildings, you cannot expect the government to appoint its project manager. It would like to, but then it's not a three-way separation of powers. So who gets to appoint the project manager? We need a non-governmental organization, an NGO, to appoint a project manager to oversee that the government does not make a totalitarian project. And that project manager then will be there representing the humanitarian aspect of the project. We need to finally get the geometry right, the geometry of the urban built environment. For 1 century, we have been building according to an inhuman geometry. We have been blindly following the same anti-urban typologies year after year without learning anything from our mistakes. We are wasting land and materials to create an unloved world fit only for cars. Even our beloved suburbs are inhuman. People buy into the utopian dream of escaping to the suburb, to nature. I'm sorry, but suburbia is not nature. Suburban sprawl represents a toxic disconnectedness. It is not urban. It is disconnected. And many people are going to get upset with me for saying that, but I have proved it in my books. We have isolated house without community. Those houses maintain useless front lawns and backyards. We have a wrong geometry that looks nice. Here I can go do an entirely different lecture, which I will have to restrain myself, where the native vegetation is stripped to plant lawn, especially in desert regions, in a world where water is scarce and getting scarcer. Every 5 years we have serious problems with water. So we get rid of native vegetation that has evolved in a particular region for millions of years, and we replace it with lawn in order to mimic Scottish highlands, and then we water it and we waste all this water. This is craziness of the highest degree, which my friends and I cannot get over. But we are doing it because it looks nice. We are building according to some picture, some absurd picture. We clear land for this. We have massive land clearance. And we keep saying suburbia celebrates nature. No, it violates nature, because suburbia represents the nihilistic destruction of landscape and the inherent natural forms that occur on that landscape before humans invade it. We replace nature with dead typologies. And those typologies are driven by the basest profit motive and by false images of a utopian modernity. We keep going back to these images of utopian modernity. We have been sold these images and we keep reproducing them. It's like a reproducing virus that I have discussed in my books. There's nothing wrong with making a profit. And we, my friends and I who are urbanists, we create new cities. We create new groups of buildings. We regenerate cities. We all want to make a profit. There's nothing wrong with making a profit. There's no need to kill the city or the land to make a profit. My friends and I, in the article Growing Sustainable Suburbs, put forward a very detailed proposal on how to regenerate existing suburbs. We claim that we need a massive reconstruction effort, which is comparable to post-war rebuilding after the European capitals that were completely bombed out during the war and cities in Japan. We have vast regions of unsustainable sprawl in the United States and increasingly all around the world. We either have to regenerate them or we have to abandon them. My friend James Howard Kunstler keeps trying to wake up the world on the unsustainability of suburban sprawl. Many people are starting to listen. Here are 5 steps for regeneration that Lucien Stahl, Michael Mahaffey, and myself proposed. First, we partition the existing suburbia into pedestrian catchment regions. This is a notion that's adopted by all new urbanists. Pedestrian catchment regions are a region that you can comfortably walk across. And then we partition it and we create the boundary. But this is not the boundary of the gated community, which is totally closed. This is a semi-permeable boundary, a boundary that defines geographically the edge of the region, and it's important to define its edge for the following steps, which are going to change the density. So it's essential to define it geographically by built structures, but those built structures have to be permeable so that people can walk across and vehicles can go across, etc. So this is the notion of semi-permeability, a biological notion, by the way, coming from membranes that allow some things through and others not. Once we have this partition, we increase the density towards the center of the catchment region by successively building more and more things toward the center, and we wish to create mixed-use urban centers. The maximum number of uses that exclude only uses such as heavy industry or a rock concert stadium that will disturb the other uses. Around the mixed-use urban center, which can be dense, we have a mixed-use intermediate ring. And only the periphery of the pedestrian catchment region will be left with the sparse density that we see today in sprawl. In order to achieve this, we need to reconfigure the road structure for optimum pedestrian connectivity. I had a discussion with one of my architects friends, and he said, "Oh, you cannot change the roads." Well, we change the roads every 3 years because the roads we have today break down. They're so poorly built. So, and instead of fixing the position of existing roads and going and fixing it over and over again in the same position, when the time comes to make a major repair on this road, we can certainly change it in order to make the reconstruction of suburbia that we propose. So here we have the need for periodic review to see what needs to be done. It is not as massive a task as one would think. We need to abandon the currently used but inhuman process of industrial development. We need to adopt new guidelines for adaptive design and construction. And the new ideas for practical implementation include the step-by-step decision sequence. That's what's going to save us. Periodic review of what must be done, choosing what is most important, and then implementing that. Not going in all at once to say, we're going to change all the roads, we're going to change all the buildings. No, you do it step by step. Here is an efficiency strategy that uses Pareto's 20-80 rule. This is from economics, but it's applicable to any system. 20% of the problems take up 80% of the time and effort. And let's apply this to a single complex process. The bottlenecks in 20% or less of an algorithm cause 80% or more of the overall delays. Thus, we need to focus on the bottlenecks one at a time. In our urban regeneration, we find the most serious bottleneck, we focus on that, we fix it, then we find the next most serious one, we focus on that, we fix it one at a time. So while I'm describing a relaxed process of change, we better get started on it immediately because the world needs to prepare for drastic change. It is not necessary to run out of petroleum, as James Howard Kunstler warns against. The situation he describes will occur even if the world does not run out of stockpiles of petroleum, because Brazil, China, and India will take most of the petroleum to maintain their oil-dependent industry and urbanization. Something has happened to those countries, and I love those countries dearly, but they are bulldozing their sustainable urban fabric in order to replace it with an unsustainable nightmare of steel and glass that they will need more and more petroleum to drive. And this is very disturbing. But what's happening over there, I hope they wake up very, very soon. But the rest of us who are now consuming petroleum and are trying to downgrade to sustainability, we need to survive in an era without oil. Only sustainable urban reconfiguration will prevent a third world war over oil. I'm sorry to say this, but indications are going in that direction. In chapter 6 of my book, Principles of Urban Structure, I describe the theoretical framework of generating the form of living cities. So we are ready now to implement all those rules in order to create a more sustainable city. But today it is impossible to implement them with existing zoning laws. So we cannot do as I propose in my book, to connect the fractal city. Because the city is not connected, the city is not fractal. The existing zoning laws tie our hands. Where do these zoning laws come from? Let me step back a little bit and look at codes in general, codes used to create life. The DNA information is coded in all our cells, and it's responsible for all the biological structure. It creates life through genetic codes. The same process occurs with urban codes. The developing embryo uses both DNA information and the existing geometry of the configuration at each step. Some people may not know this. The DNA information is not all that is necessary to make the embryo. The embryo depends upon the existing geometry of the configuration, and chemicals in the environment. That's why it's extremely careful to keep the pregnant mother safe from harmful chemicals while the embryo is developing. To develop good urban form, we need a good set of codes. So the first priority is for us to replace the present modernist codes that are on the books with new urbanist codes. The new urbanist codes that we can get today for free are form-based codes, whereas I am arguing for a step further. We need to enhance the design process by implementing generative codes, and that's the topic of this series of lectures. Once we have those in place, good form-based codes enhanced with generative codes, then the formation of healthy urban fabric will occur naturally over time. All we need to do is let the process work, and it's going to occur naturally. However, if we leave the modernist codes in place, urbanism can only grow into inhuman forms. It's like the DNA. You have DNA for a monster, it will create you a monster. Here are some of the codes that generate inhuman forms. Building setbacks, monofunctional zoning, separation of work from residence, a monstrous grid street pattern, monstrous being too large for a pedestrian scale. The priority given to car geometry for everything. The exclusive use of industrial design materials. This is a religious obsession with modernists, industrial design materials. Even in developing countries where you have so many local materials, but no, the urbanists insist on using imported materials at tremendous expense. There is a fixation with this idea of industrial design materials. It's clearly time to get over that. Continue with the ills of modernist urbanism. It creates impermeable sheer walls at street level. These are fundamentally hostile to the pedestrian. There is no place for the pedestrian. There is no shared urban space. Garages in individual houses are used for storing consumer junk. Everyone knows that after a while, garage becomes full of junk and the cars are parked on the outside. So the residential street then becomes a parking lot. The brochure that Americans see before they buy a house in a sprawled subdivision of beautifully kept lawns, the children playing in front of the houses, is a deception. Those sprawl houses develop so that all the cars eventually, 2 or 3 or 4 cars per family, park in front and on the street and in the driveways, because, as I said, the garage becomes full of junk. Children cannot play because people speed down that small road, because that small road is built to the specifications of a superhighway. In the most laid-back suburban sprawl, you have a highway in front of your house. So even though most cars are not there during the day, you don't know when your child can get run over by somebody going 60 miles an hour. Forget about the sign that says 20 miles an hour. Where is the policeman to make sure that people keep these signs? To prove what I'm saying is correct, when you drive in United States sprawl, you have to go over speed bumps. The speed bumps are there as a half measure of curing a problem, which is that people speed through these roads because they are made for speeding. They say the geometry. The geometry triggers high velocity vehicles. Now, let's turn positive here. Even minimal good codes can make an enormous difference. We can begin today by implementing some sane urban codes. For example, take David Suscher's 3 rules for dense urban fabric. It will solve many mistakes overnight. And then, just by implementing 3 rules, we can proceed with a major urban reconstruction proposed by us. If you have not heard of David Suscher's, here is his 3 rules for central urban regions. 1, build to the sidewalk, which means build to the property line. 2, make building front permeable, that is to pedestrians, visual and also for entry. 3, prohibit parking lots in front of the building and allow parking only on street, or the rest of the parking is in the back. You cannot ask for three more simple propositions, yet these implementation of these rules will fix most American cities tomorrow. Well, it will take a while to implement them, but they can certainly go on the books tomorrow. These are taken from David Susher's books, City Comforts. Here's David's cover of the book. So now we proceed to more rules. Codes that build living urban fabric. Generative codes combined with patterns from a pattern language will create living urban fabric. For example, let's take a single pattern from the pattern language. Many people who read the pattern language know this. The 6-foot balcony. Pattern number 167 tells you that for a balcony to be used, it has to be no less than 2 meters deep, about 6 feet. This would improve the lives of hundreds of millions of people around the world. With just a minor adjustment, if people had a 6-foot balcony, they could spend time, quality time on the 6-foot balcony. If it's less than 2 meters deep, the balcony is fundamentally unaccommodating to human life. So why all over the world, and I'm saying hundreds of millions of people living with a cramped little balcony, with just a minor adjustment, could make the balcony a part of the usable space that they have in their apartment. And the pattern language with this pattern was published in about 25 or 30 years ago. Let me move to the next topic. Secularization destroys public space. Urban space is common space. It is the main function of a city. It is a place of interaction between people. Historically, public space always had a sacred quality, and humanity relied on a space of interactions. Sacred spaces are those spaces which are valued by the society. These are common spaces that people are willing to defend and maintain. When we look at these spaces very closely and examine them, we feel that there is a certain sacred character. Sometimes the spaces are an entryway to sacred ground, or even if they have no actual sacred quality in the religious sense attached to them, they are the glue that binds people to a place. So these are the spaces that people are willing to defend. They can be very modest. They can be public or private, but they need to be shared. Most disturbing is that sacred spaces are not supposed to exist today, following our secular philosophy, at least in the West. In fact, they do exist, only we're not supposed to see them. The process of building a community has to reverse the loss of spiritual values and human qualities from our society. I discussed it at great length in this chapter of a book entitled Favelas and Social Housing, the Urbanism of Self-Organization, written by myself, David Brain, Andres Duani, Michael Mahaffey, and Ernesto Philibert Petit. This is not published as a chapter in the New Urbanism and Beyond, but it's published in a separate book. What happened is that modernism erased sacred spaces. Modernist architects turned with a vicious hatred against sacred spaces. Their anti-religious credo was, there is no such thing as a sacred space. It goes hand in hand with the modernist replacement of religion with its own image-based dogma. And we can discuss it at great length, but I'm concerned in how to fix the urban fabric today. The modernists insisted with a fanaticism on the machine aesthetic, and the machine aesthetic is non-human. So the urban geometry that the modernists created is reinforced by structures which prohibit connection to the transcendental. And this geometry, therefore, has no shared meaning. It is an alien imposition on the environment. As a result, those spaces repel humans rather than connecting them or attracting them. We have very few sacred spaces today. Therefore, there is no glue to hold the contemporary city together. There's a guaranteed absence of sacred space, guaranteed by our planning codes, which were legislated deliberately to eliminate sacred space. Sacred space is illegal to build now. We have to fight against inhuman zoning. But we have forgotten. All settlements in the past several millennia were held together with sacred spaces. Even in the poorest favela today, there exist spontaneously created sacred spaces. Major or minor urban spaces are valued by nearby inhabitants. These have the broader meaning of sacred that I'm using today. Without them, there is no community, no healthy urban fabric. Let me very briefly, in the next very small section, mention spiritual architects. Many traditional architects continue to use timeless methods of building. They are ignored by the media and academia. They are not elected to professorships at the universities. You don't see their work featured in the glossy magazines that don't win prizes. Despite this obstacle, some architects in the West have reinvented these methods. What I mean now, traditional architects all over the world. In the West, there has been an outgrowth of a New Age spiritual movement of the past few decades, as some people in the mechanized West, in the industrialized West, are rediscovering some older truths. So we have a branch of what is called spiritual Western architecture, and it is usually mocked by the official media. Two spiritual architects that I have had the pleasure of meeting are Tom Bender, who works in Portland, Oregon, and Christopher Day, who works in Britain, based in Wales, and there are many others around the world. I mention these because I have met them. Their architecture is highly sensitive. These architects, and many who do what they do, work on the connectivity of human beings with the universe, and they successfully create life in buildings. Now, what all spiritual architects do is to work with effects that are perceived by human senses. This is highly scientific. These architects are responding to real forces in the environment that they can feel. However, there's a catch. Since we don't know how to fully explain the connective process of design, it remains mystical. And that's the big catch. When human beings don't understand the mechanism for something that we observe, then we usually invent a mythology for it. That's how we invented all the myths of all humankind. But to the scientific world, and I'm a scientist, this makes the phenomenon itself doubtful, which is the wrong conclusion. Because sometimes it takes centuries to gain a better understanding of an observed phenomenon. Let me summarize what someone like Christopher Day does. He does consensus design, which are socially inclusive. Christopher Day practices architecture that connects us to the sacred. And he describes the process in his book, Consensus Design, and it is the same process as our model uses to connect with a transcendental realm. The details are different, fine, but the general idea is the same. Here is Christopher Day's book. He has several other books, all very nice to read. So his method is the following. The design grows out of the site, just like we do. Walk around with users to perceive the positioning of forms and paths. Sensitive to nature and the site's geometry, you have the group, the consensus, the architect, and the future users. Trace the plan on paper after you mark it on the site, and then build a clay or plasticine model on top of the paper. And everything depends on human feelings. You use human feelings to judge form and to adjust those forms to find the optimal possibilities. The conditions for connecting give an important lessons for scientists, and these lessons come from spiritual architects. The human qualities help in connecting to a higher state of being that makes for better urbanism. It makes for more healthier people. This is killed by industrialization and the blind worship of the machine culture. Before I go into that, let me deflect a criticism Some of my American colleagues will say, why do you mention these two spiritual architects? Because when you read the books, they explain these with mystical references to non-existent forces. I don't care about that. I'm validating what they do because they create a human architecture that's very sensitive. I don't care about their explanations. I'm a scientist, fine. They can explain what they observe by their best attempt. It is not necessary to find an explanation for what you're doing if what you're doing is correct and is validated by the end product. So I don't mind the New Age explanations of these spiritualist forces, even though I don't necessarily agree with it. What I'm emphasizing here is the product and the method of getting the product, because the product is humanistic and it's adaptive and it's spiritual. That's what I care about. Now, the final, very brief section is the process of legalizing codes. And this is very, very important. We come to the crux of the matter. I spent so much time and energy discussing methods for creating a better built environment. I'm wasting my time unless we address the problem. And the problem is the following. After the Second World War, modernist urbanists quietly took control of the planning profession. They changed the urban codes to guarantee that all cities evolve towards modernist typologies. Remember the DNA. They put the DNA and made it legal. So every city now is evolving towards modernist typologies. This was a tremendous victory for the urbanicides. And I claim that modernist urbanists are urbanicides. Planning codes were written by lawyers into law after the Second World War. As Andres Duani likes to point out in his talks, the codes we have today are written by lawyers, and you have a book that every local government obliges an architect, developer, or contractor to abide by this book, and this book has nothing about urbanism. It is written by lawyers, and that DNA in that book is toxic because it guarantees an unlivable environment. Now those laws we have tie the hands of adaptive architects and urbanists like me and my friends. It is illegal to build humanistic structures. Most people in the world don't know this. There is no way for urbanists to change the codes because of the state apparatus. The only way to change the codes is to change the law. So you have to go through the state apparatus by a legal procedure. And urbanists cannot do that. It must be the legal profession that has to do that. Inhuman urban codes kill the pedestrian street. They made it illegal to mix urban functions. Inhuman zoning is not reformable. You cannot go in and change one of two of these things or revise them. There are only two solutions which are drastic. Either you will have to ignore the inhuman urban codes, but that's illegal, or they will have to be totally rewritten to build or rebuild human environments. Now, James Howard Kunstler predicts the end of oil, and he predicts the abandonment of suburbs. When society collapses because there is no more oil, I don't think any society like the United States will be in a position to enforce these stupid codes. So people will eventually begin to abandon those codes. And illegal or not, people will build what they want to build just in order to survive. That's one scenario. It's a doomsday scenario, but Kunstler thinks it can happen, and maybe it will, maybe it won't. I hope it doesn't. The other scenario is more optimistic, that we will legislate a total change of those silly or stupid codes and replace them with new urbanist codes. 1933 was a fateful year for at least two events. Le Corbusier largely wrote the 1933 Charter of Athens, cruising aboard the ship Patrice in the beautiful Mediterranean from Marseille to Athens. He codified his antisocial hatred of traditional city life into a set of geometric rules. And for various reasons that I have previously discussed it, they were implemented by many governments, both during the war and after the war. Now, we another group of friends, has taken the trouble to rewrite the Charter of Athens, to replace it with a new Charter of Athens. This is the fruit of the European Council of Town Planners, and it was done in 2003. Actually, it was done several years earlier, and every several years it is upgraded and revised. And the new Charter of Athens proposes a sustainable network urbanism, exactly what I describe in my books. It is oriented towards human-scale activities and well-being. I have been privileged to get in on this group, and I made some revisions to the last version of the new Charter of Athens. Please, if you are at all interested, look this up and tell everybody who is willing to listen to just drop the old Charter of Athens, which is just Le Corbusier's antisocial obsession, and replace it with a new Charter of Athens. When modernist planners were invited to take over the world's urbanism, and governments and corporations all swallowed the deception of progress, they turned control of building over to a bunch of dangerous urbanicides, and those in turn imposed their ideology. For that reason, we have what we have today. Now, the modernists may have been urbanicides, which is close to criminal for our cities, but they were clever, at least some of them. So when they came to power, they rewrote all the planning laws. They solidified their power by using the established legal system. You can say that they commandeered the legal system in order to express their ideology, but they did this successfully. So we have the codes we have today, and they are legal. First priority of the anti-humanist zoning laws was Le Corbusier's call to kill the street, and I have discussed that in Lecture 8. Urbanicides solidified their takeover of urbanism by co-opting the legal system. Since then, no real change is possible. We continue to reproduce inhuman urban typologies because it is illegal to do otherwise. So to conclude, we need to change the legal structure that guides development of the built urban fabric. We need to change our planning laws. That's not an easy task, and that's not a task that can be done by architects and urbanists. It's a task that has to be legislated. I appeal to everyone around the world to look at the serious, egregious flaws of modern-day planning regulations and codes. Please look at these. They're destroying our cities. Every government has to do the best it can as soon as possible to replace them with more humanistic codes. I keep talking about my friends. Well, the Congress of New Urbanism, whose meeting I'm going to later today, consists of several hundred people. Andres Duani has a set of form-based codes. They're freely available on the internet. Anyone can use them to pick what they like from them and incorporate them in the codes. The papers of Christopher Alexander, the latest publications I mentioned, full of detailed specifications on how to implement generative codes. There is a wealth of material out there that either you can just cut and paste to replace the urbanicidal modernist codes, or have some local committee to pick and choose what you think is most relevant for your locality and to implement that as soon as possible so we can build cities for the sustainable future. Let me emphasize, whoever wants to do this, once you start looking into what my friends and I have done, you will see that these are not tailored to a specific location. These are general, because human beings are general. Human beings are the same all over the world, and while local conditions differ, our solutions are infinitely adaptable. That's the difference between us and them, the modernist, the urbanist. Our solutions are infinitely adaptable. You start to implement our codes in Chennai, India, you're going to get a beautiful, livable, local urban fabric. You implement our solutions in Madagascar, you're going to get a different looking urban fabric. It's going to be adapted there because our forms, our codes don't impose a form, they impose a process. and even the static codes have some adaptation built in. So we're working on this now. It is a process in development, but certainly today communities are implementing these codes, and they are changing slowly for the better, and people notice the real estate values going up. People are moving in to these communities. This is the solution for sustainability in the future. Thank you very much.